I'm not someone who has had a lot of involvement on one end or the other of the political spectrum, and I think more and more people are feeling that that's the category that they're in. And it's no surprise that that's true, because the parties are getting further and further apart, and as they do that, they're leaving people behind.
Parker Harris teaches math, physics, and philosophy at the Attic Learning Center in Woodinville. He's also taught high school math and science in Seattle and has a background in environmental and aircraft engineering. Harris supports repealing the state sales tax and replacing it with a personal income tax. He also supports class size reduction, a single-payer health care system, and transportation spending reform. But Harris says he's willing to compromise on these issues or any other if he thinks it's in the best interest of the state and the district to move forward.
The reason that I'm running is not to push a specific policy agenda. The reason that I'm running is to facilitate peacemaking and be a go-between and help the parties work together toward solutions that are actually going to last in the legislature, because a real problem that's been happening is that a lot of legislation gets passed by whatever party happens to be in power at the moment, but control flip-flops all the time in our state. And we've been sort of running our whole state for a long time now on a string of temporary fixes, and that doesn't help anyone on either side. So even if I personally happen to be conservative on one particular issue, the reason that I'm running for the legislature is not to get conservative legislation on that issue. It's to help the legislature facilitate solutions about that issue that are going to be agreeable enough to both parties that they last when party control flips from one party to the other, or when the budget cycle rolls over.
Campaign finance records show that as of May 24th, the independent candidate had raised just over $700 for his campaign. In contrast, both the Democratic candidate and the Republican candidate in the 45th have each raised more than $250,000 in campaign funds. We asked Harris how he expects to get out his message and compete against candidates whose campaign budgets are hundreds of times larger.
I personally have walked around the district for the last month or so. You can see my shoes are pretty worn out. They're only 2 weeks old. We've visited about 10,000 houses, talked to over 1,000 people, and it doesn't matter how much money comes into this campaign from the other candidates. They can't stop me, and they can't stop my volunteers from talking to real individuals in person and listening to them and making sure that their voices are heard. And I think that once this election really gets going, that the other candidates are going to start proving my point for me, because the mere fact that there's going to be over $1 million here and they're going to be lobbing cannonballs at each other and blowing each other out of the water, when I come in and talk to someone who's already in the midst of that campaign where they're going to be saturated with information from both sides, they're going to say, hey, I'm frustrated with the choices that I have. The parties know that I'm frustrated with the choices that I had, and that's why they're putting so much effort into beating up on the other guy. And then, oh, I hear about Parker Harris's candidacy. And here's someone who wants to listen and not shout. Here's someone who wants to make peace instead of beating up on the other party. Here's someone who wants to make sure that our voices are heard. And I think that all the money in the big parties' campaigns are going to end up helping my cause.
The independent claims his lack of resources could work in his favor in the event of an ad war between his opponents, especially if things get negative.
In transportation, we're throwing tons and tons of money at ideas that come from whichever party happens to be in power at the time. And I think it's really sad and really frustrating, and I know a lot of people agree with me, when there's not a voice in the legislature that's willing to sit down and listen to ideas regardless of who says them. And I think that my campaign is going to be successful because we're saying we're going to listen to people, we're going to listen to all the ideas, and we're going to evaluate ideas based on their merit and based on what they're going to do for the people, and that's going to make its way into all the issues that are important for our state.
The primary election is August 1st. Only the top 2 candidates from each race with opposition will move on to the November 7th election. Still